Okay guys, just a quickie about adding the tailplane. It's fairly obvious from the instructions that basically you're going to be gluing this tailplane to here. Now, you want to make sure that it's square with the rest of the aircraft. A couple of easy things to do. Just stick the wings on, get them nice and square, and then literally if you look down from the nose through the wings, what you're looking for, I don't know if you can see that or not, is, I mean, you can do it by eye. If you want to be mathematical, you can do it by measurements as well. But we're just looking at this measurement here to here. Either side is square. What you also want to do is just look down from the back of the glider and make sure that the distance from the tail to the wing is about right. The other thing you can do is that if you get yourself a tape measure, this is quite important, and then just measure from the wingtip to the tip of the tailplane like so, tip of the tailplane like so, and they are both spot on at 16 inches, or in new money, that's 41 centimeters, and that is 41 centimeters. So when you've got that glued in place, then the next thing is we're going to talk about connecting the servos to the control surfaces. So a nice little way, because we're going to be using these control runs, I'm using this braided fishing line. So we've got my rudder horn there. Now, if we just literally hold on to the braided line there, we already know that our servos are sitting just above this former. So if we just hold that braided fishing line in about the right position where we think our servos are, the nice thing this is now going to give us is an entry for where it should go on the fuselage. So where the cable should go through the fuselage, because we don't want it running along the outside. So in fact, actually, assuming that we've got that there, and then we're actually going to be just going onto that servo like so, we now know that about, let me just line that back up, about somewhere here we can quite easily just pop a little hole in, and then we can then run the cable from the outside through to the inside, and we can do that with all the others. So I can do exactly the same on the other side. Just hold that there and just grab hold of the braided line and run it along the fuselage side, and again that's going to give us a good idea of where we can just put a little nick in the covering and then just feed on the inside. If we want to, a couple of things we could do to do it really properly. I've got some little plastic tube here which you could use the just the fine end off of a biro, which we could just insert into there. Or if we then put a little hole where the cable's going to go, we could, if we wanted to, particularly with this fabric covering, I could put a very, very small patch, but I don't actually think that this is going to give us a lot of problems with wear. But that's just how I'm setting up these, and I'm going to do exactly the same again for the elevator. Look, just run that along there, and that's going to give me a good idea of where these cable runs are going to go. But bearing in mind that the cables are going to go from the outside of the aircraft, the control surfaces, through into the inside, then onto the two servos. Right guys, little idea. I have attached temporarily, I have attached the cables to the rudder horns. I've put my little plastic sleeves on. I've fed the braided fishing line as much as possible through these little slits I've created, and I've fed as much of it down. Now obviously that's going to be real difficulty to get that to feed down. A little tip I'd give you here, just get the hoover, job done, fed through. Right guys, I've fed the cables, or hoovered the cables through, and now what I've done is I've now unclipped them from the rudder. You could have just used a little bit of sellotape, but I actually like to tie them in case it gets sucked all the way through. So now all we're going to do, 2 clothes pegs, a couple of bits of scrap wood out of your kit, go across the rudder and the rudder fin like so. One on the rudder, one on the fin. Don't be tempted to use these again these plastic commercial ones, they are quite strong. They might damage your covering. Now all I'm going to do with that completely square and straight, I'm then just going to literally tie these on with a bit of tension. If you can, what we're looking for is exactly the same amount of tension. It's depending on how good your knot tying is. But what we're looking for is to try and tie these up with a fair amount of tension, but whatever tension you use, you don't want them sloppy. You want some tension. You don't want it over tension, so it's actually will pull the rudder onto the fin, but fair amount of tension. Then that's tied on, the other side's done. That will then give you the control surface working. Right guys, there we go. I have finished the cables. We've got the elevator cable. I've actually put the little plastic tubes in, and I'm just gonna, for neatness, I'm just gonna cover those with a little bit of Solatex, I think, just to hold them in place. So remember, as I said before, make sure that any power settings like throttles are closed. Always switch the transmitter on first, never the aeroplane. And then I'm switching the aeroplane on. I'm getting a green signal to say that there's a good connection to the aircraft. So up and down, that's up, down, and that's right, and that's left. That's going to be more than enough control for this glider, and we've got no flap in the system. There's a fair bit of rigidity there. I've just got that just spot on, so I'm very pleased with that. So literally the last thing to do now is I'm just going to tidy up a few bits and pieces, and then I'm going to come back and talk about getting it set up ready for flying.